Just a quick one on me. Deb Atkinson, lived in Greenwood since 2018, so I tend to bring a different point of view. Bill here thinks I should be the one to introduce our next speaker. I don't know why, just because I have a library science degree, a degree in English, and what he doesn't realize is I'm 2 weeks into my 4th master's on history. Josh Malkin is with the ACLU of South Carolina. You want to know this young man. You want to keep him on your side, and you want to put him to work. He did start teaching, and then he decided to go for something easier. He became a lawyer. And he is here to talk about the freedom to read. Now, the freedom to read is not just about what you read, it is about how it is censored before it even gets on the page. I was sitting over there, nothing against y'all with the county council, perusing through an ACLU article I just got. They're rewriting history because they don't want to admit what happened. So, the freedom to read is the freedom to read the truth. So Josh has got his hands full, and I'm going to keep this very short, beyond the fact that when Bill called me earlier, I had a sinus infection, and Josh, you can have a good laugh at this one. I swear to God, he said your name was Josh Mountain. And so I'm going to make you climb the mountain. Get on up here. Give him a hand, folks. Make him happy. Make him well. Put him to work.
Good morning. Can you all hear me? All right. It's great to be with y'all. Quick disclaimer. I very quickly get to a place of passionate rage. So if I'm saying things that are jumbled, please just make a note so you can ask me a question at the end. I spent 5 years teaching middle school and high school math in New Orleans. So the idea, the fight for educational equity is very near and dear to my heart. I think before we even get into the freedom to read, I very want to quickly touch on the critical race theory craze that we saw precede this attack on books. So I am not the historian that Deb likely is, but I think when we look at history, we look at periods of progress followed by swift backlash, right? So you have Reconstruction, and then you have the Black Codes. You have the Civil Rights Movement, then you have mass incarceration. As sad as this is to admit, CRT is the backlash to the extremist radical right seeing the response to George Floyd's murder. George Floyd is murdered, and there is a fear that the white power structure is going to take to the streets and start to actually address racial inequities in this country. So what is the backlash to that? It's CRT. And so the censorship bill that is currently still not law in South Carolina, it's the same language that's in Florida. It's the same language that's in Texas. It's the same language that's in Oklahoma. But because we were able to mobilize in South Carolina, we filled 18 hours of public testimony voicing opposition. Because we were able to do that, that bill after 2 years is still not law. So if you look at the map, yeah, thank you. If you look at the map at where that exact same bill is now law, it's pretty much everywhere around us, right? South Carolina is actually an outlier in that we don't yet have this law on the books. But because so many other states passed the bill, and because all of politics is national politics now, book bans entered the fray, right? We dealt with making sure that students couldn't learn about race, so what's next? And they pivoted to book bans, they pivoted to libraries. So, very quickly, there are two types of book bans as I see it. There are explicitly prejudiced book bans. There are books that talk about systemic racism, they have black characters, they have black authors. We're talking about Stamped, we're talking about The Hate U Give, we're talking about Dear Martin, we're talking about All American Boys. Then there are books, there are attacks that are just prejudiced against sexual orientation and gender identity. These books might be a little bit lesser known. They're typically children's books, but My Shadow is Purple, Too Bright to See, genderqueer books like that. I don't really have patience for those arguments, right? You're coming in here, you're telling me that you're prejudiced and you don't think this book should be available. I just don't have the time for it. The second type of book ban, and this is, our book banners have gotten savvier, focus on books they deem to be age inappropriate. And that's a very subjective term, but what that means to most people is sexual content, sexual violence, drug use, mental health, gun violence, suicidal ideation, really anything that folks think could be age inappropriate. And my response to that is, we have experts, right? Age appropriateness is subjective, and that's why we need experts, and our experts are our librarians. And secondly, books provide a safe way to interact with the dangerous elements of our society that our teens already do, if not soon will, interact with. Right? So I've been at hearings across this state where young women get up and they themselves are survivors of sexual violence, and they say, I read The Perks of Being a Wallflower, and because I was able to see what that protagonist was going through, I didn't feel alone. My feelings of guilt, of shame, I realized that they were normal and it was not my fault. Those are the two types of book bans. We're seeing them everywhere. We're fighting back everywhere, but we're seeing them everywhere. To get to some broader points here. One, all of this censorship, all of these book bans are coinciding with harassment of educators. Right? So a librarian friend of mine got up and she testified and she said, because we're seeing this nationally motivated surge in book bans, librarians are being harassed. Our superintendent of education didn't acknowledge that librarians were being harassed. She said, did you just say the word bans? That's not a book ban. We're just moving it off the shelves because it's not appropriate. Well, all right. You're Bob Jones master at work there. But so we're seeing an increased harassment of educators, one. Second, this authoritarian belief that one person can decide what's available for all children, right? They like to talk about parental rights, and I will rag them all day long, right? Because the idea, every single parent has multiple opportunities to opt their children out of a book. I think that too can be dangerous. I'll be honest with you. I think censoring your own child can also be dangerous, but you're the parent. I get it. You can make those choices. There are multiple opportunities for you to do that. That's not what these people are doing. A woman in Berkeley this week said these 93 books should not be available to any child in the district. Same woman. Didn't fill out the forms, said she read the books, but the idea to me that one person thinks it's appropriate to make curricular or library decisions for 35,000 children is as anti-democratic as anything I've ever seen. And lastly, because I want to end on the most cynical note possible, all of this, in my estimation, is a very well coordinated and very well funded effort to dismantle public education. So, your Moms for Liberty, your John McCravy's, your, every one of this, they're puppets, right? These are not the folks who are orchestrating the movements. The people who are orchestrating the movements are the people like the Koch brothers, who will make billions if they dismantle public ed because they'll set up the schools. And also the folks on the radical religious right who believe that their God should be in schools. So it's very convenient for them to bring racists in and to bring homophobes in and let them do the footwork. But what these battles do, the battles against curriculum, the battles against books, what they are in furtherance of is they want public educators to feel so uncomfortable, to feel so afraid, to feel so much like they can't do their jobs the way that they care so much about doing them, that they leave the classroom so that then those folks can say, well, look it, our public education system is failing. We can't address this teacher crisis that's ongoing. So what do we need to do? We need to send your taxpayer dollars to private religious schools with no sense of accountability. I don't think I can get more cynical than that. If I have time, if there's time for questions, I'm happy to take them.
Well, we got time.
Okay, great.
We got time for you.
Oh, can I say one more before I forget? One more before I forget. In addition to how ridiculous this is that one person can make decisions for 30,000 children, it is not surprising that these folks never follow process, right? So every district has a policy in place where even if you make the decision that you should be in control of 30,000 children, there's a policy in place that you should follow. These folks don't follow the policy. In Beaufort, where 2 folks challenged 97 titles, they called the sheriff first. They said there's porn in the libraries, they called the sheriff. The police have been called twice to the Greenville Public Libraries to investigate porn in the libraries. And the police get there and they say, what am I doing in the children's section of a library? But they don't fill out the forms, they don't follow the process, they don't attempt to have conversations with their children's teachers, with their children's administrators. So all wrapped into this authoritarianism, the world is ending, public ed is coming apart, is this complete disregard for process and civil discourse.
All right, do we have questions for Josh? All right, we'll start with Deb.
Thank you. I was going to say that I didn't mention it earlier, but I heard a book band that they followed the forms. 2 people copied and pasted the same form and sent it in multiple times to a library out west somewhere, trying to remove multiple books. 2 people. So yeah, they can use the process to do this. Keep that in mind too.
All right. Anybody else? Questions?
I'm sure you've heard of Prager University.
Of which one?
Never heard of Prager? Mm-hmm.
Where they're showing
PragerU.
the videos of, in Florida?
Right. Is there anything the ACLU can do to stop their disinformation being given to young kids? I mean, I know they're only in Florida and Oklahoma, but God forbid they come to South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, these are the months for advocacy. You know, we do have a legal team, but I mean, I really think a lot of this can be solved and needs to be fought with advocacy. So as you know, I think we can start doing it now because we can assume it's coming our way. So getting in touch, maybe not y'all's legislators. I don't know if McCravey and Garrett are really going to be the best audience, but reaching out to legislators, reaching out to friends across the state to let them know what's going on, and that they should be reaching out to their school boards and their legislators to let them know just how dangerous this is.
Is there a way that we can get a point across that when you have parents in herds trying to get rid of books, my thought is, if you're a parent, you tell your children not to read that book. Yet we're having groups of parents. There's parents that do want the books in there. So somehow we got to communicate that. How can we do that?
I feel disgusting with silver linings, but I'll share one. Where we are fighting back against book bans, we are winning. There are beautiful communities in Greenville, in Spartanburg, in Pickens, in Anderson, in Beaufort, where folks have been fighting back against book bans and winning, right? So of the 70 books that have been so far reviewed in Beaufort, 66 remain on shelves. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of resources, but folks are keeping books on shelves. I will say the secret weapon in this fight, if there is a silver bullet in this fight, and the fight is long and the fight is ugly no matter what, the silver bullet is letting students know what's happening. Because what happened in Beaufort is you had this group of 5 students, and they showed up every board meeting, they read every book, and when they got up there and they shared how they felt about their rights being taken away, that school board listened in a very different way than when it's just one group of adults saying we are afraid of books and the other group of adults saying no, we like books. So anything you can do to get to build student advocacy really changes the game.
So a couple of things that you should be watching. even though most of us in here should be voting on a Democratic stance, if you look at the Republican presidential candidates, and I'm particularly focused in my mind right now on Nikki Haley, who is beating her chest so proud that the Moms of Liberty now respect her. And she agrees and she appreciates what the Moms of Liberty are doing to save our children. Nikki, our children. Okay, so I got a problem with that. Not only is it Nikki, though, you need to check the candidates on the Republican side. Moms of Liberty is having a lot of pull. Now, Moms of Liberty has been added to what list? What are they known for now? They're on the terrorist list, the hate list, the don't deal with list. A group has been added this way. Let me tell you what this is in my thought process. Anytime a parent or individuals who represent parents get in front of a group and say your child should not read this because it promotes racism, it promotes gender confusion, they are what they are trying to stop your child from reading. You are the parent. The same way that one mom can file 92 complaints, one mom can come out with a couple of other moms and have support to block those 92 complaints. One group should not be able to come into your home, your town, and tell your children what to read. These are your kids. If you want them reading the books, then you let Moms at Liberty or whatever they call themselves know that they can't come to Greenwood and tell us what our children can and cannot read. You know why? Because we're educated enough to know what we want in our households and what we don't. Anytime a parent chooses not to have that conversation with their child about what is read, that is a missed opportunity for that parent. And that is not something that a state legislator gets to decide what your children read. That's your job. So take a stand and stop letting them do that to you.
Any more questions for Mr. Malkin? All right, final round of applause for Josh. Thank you for coming down and visiting with us. I have two final words on the topic that Mr. Malkin gave us. First of all, for those of you that read our last email newsletter and then showed up and wondered why the guy at the podium didn't look like the guy in the newsletter, the picture I sent, because I grabbed the wrong Josh Malkin's picture off the internet. Apparently, I found a Josh Malkin look-alike who was an engineer in the UK on LinkedIn, and I'm at 10 o'clock at night whipping up this newsletter, and I slapped his picture in. Josh here gets that email, sends me a note, and says, listen, not a big deal, but that ain't me. So if you're a little confused why a better-looking Josh Malkin showed up than what you expected, now you know.